Good evening and welcome to the Corte Madera Planning Commission meeting for tonight, which is, what is tonight? It's December 10th. No, it's not. Yes, it is. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Metcalf, here. Commissioner Bundy, here. Commissioner Chase,
here.
Commissioner Lee, here. And Commissioner Bendel.
Here. Thank you. Tonight, before every meeting, we open the meeting to public comment for something that is not on the agenda. And I think I see somebody, no, not tonight. So if you have a comment about something that's not on tonight's agenda, please step up to the microphone and take 3 minutes.
Jane is.
Yay. Jane.
Yes, I'm here. Here I am.
We need you to
Good to see you.
Well, yes, okay. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm happy to be back. I have one warning to everybody: don't trip in your bedroom and find yourself flat on your back for 5 weeks in a rehab hospital.
Ooh.
Not a good way to spend 5 weeks. Anyway, I am here to praise, not to bury. Maggiore and Gelati. They are digging up Tamil Vista. They started yesterday. They were there all day today, and they're going to finish up tomorrow if the rain stops. It was predicted last night on the weather station, and they were correct, and it is raining, but hopefully it's not going to rain tomorrow and they can finish up. I don't know whether you people, when they do stuff on your streets, if you ever go out and watch them, it's really, and ask questions and talk to the people that are working. I learned more yesterday and today than I have ever learned about sewers under the street, what they look like, why they had to be replaced, and what is going on Tamil Vista. But I want to say that all those people who work for these folks, they are the nicest people. They couldn't be nicer. They bend over backwards to make it as pleasant and as comfortable as it can be. I got to put my car across the street at the movie theater, and I just had to walk over there when I wanted to use it. But I got an escort to my car. You know, Tamil Vista is a very narrow street, and I don't even want to go into that. But these people are wonderful, and I look forward to any of the work that they're going to do. If they spill a little bit of dust or rocks on the ground, they sweep it up. I mean, I kept thinking, gee, if they would just come into my house and do a little sweeping, I'd be... And by the way, if you have little tiny black ants, the only thing that will dispel them and disperse them, kill them, and get out of your house is a product called Terra, T-E-R-R-A. It is a self-contained liquid, and it does the job every time. And that's all I have to say about that. And I'm very happy with these people and what they're doing so far.
Thank you very much, Jane. I'm sorry we don't have a local radio station to put you on.
And I told them as well.
Right.
The people in all the different pieces of equipment. And I may even buy some stock in deer, depending on what it's costing these days.
Well, I agree with you because our street was repaved and it's marvelous. Anyway, thank you. All right, we're here tonight, most of us, to talk about the continued hearing for 223 Baltimore Avenue. This is a design review application PL 2019-0084 for the demolition of an existing residence and the construction of a new 3,114 square foot single-story residence with a 665 square foot attached garage at 223 Baltimore. So this is a continued hearing, and Martha will take us through the history and explain where we are today.
Yep.
Good
evening, Chair Chase, members of the Commission. This evening, the Planning Commission will be considering a proposal for a new single-story residence at 223 Baltimore Avenue. Staff did receive comments on the packet after it was published, and comments were provided to the Commission, and also there are copies in the back of the room as well. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on the project on November 12, 2019. And at that meeting, 11 members of the public provided comments. 6 individuals spoke in opposition and 5 in support of the project. And all of the comments that were received are included in the draft Planning Commission meeting minutes included as attachment 2. At the meeting, the Planning Commission continued the item to this evening and requested that staff coordinate outreach meetings between the applicants and the adjoining neighbors. The project site is located at 223 Baltimore Avenue in the Baltimore Park neighborhood. There are 2 single-family homes located adjacent to the project site, which include to the north 229 Baltimore Avenue and to the west 219 Baltimore Avenue. Located to the south and to the east is the Parkview Terrace condominium development, which includes approximately 40 condominiums, and those are set at a lower elevation than the project site. The applicant is proposing to construct the residence located in the eastern portion of the site. There is an existing curb cut on Baltimore Avenue that will remain, and a driveway with pavers is proposed. The applicant is proposing a 20-foot setback from the front property line to the garage, and 20 feet is the required setback. Along the eastern property boundary, the setback varies from 6 feet at the garage to 8 feet, and then at the master suite, approximately 19 feet, where a 6-foot setback is required. The rear yard setback is 25 feet, where 25 feet is required, and the proposed western side setback is 37 feet, where 6 feet is required. Also in the western portion of the site, the applicant is proposing outdoor spaces, which include a patio, a swimming pool, and then outdoor seating. These pictures show the existing site conditions. There is an existing 2-story structure located in the northwestern portion of the property. This has a height of approximately 22 feet, and it includes a basement and garage on the first level and then a living area on the second level. And this existing residence is about 5 feet from the western property boundary. The picture on the left is looking in the northerly direction. There are 3 trees in the northern portion of the site, which includes the bunya bunya tree, also known as monkey puzzle, a palm tree, and a cedar tree, and the applicant is proposing to remove those trees as part of the project. The picture in the middle is looking towards in a southerly direction, and you can see there are 3 stumps of the eucalyptus trees that were removed by the applicant. And the site slopes in the southerly direction. The average slope is about 17%, and the majority of the slope changes in about the lower 1/3 of the site. The pictures on the right show the existing 2-story structure. This picture is looking at the picture on the upper right-hand corner is of the rear of the structure, and the picture on the lower right-hand corner is of the front of the structure from Baltimore Avenue. At the November 12th Planning Commission meeting, one of the commissioners asked about the trees that were removed from the site. When the applicants purchased the property, they cleared a lot of the brush, the Scotch broom, the poison oak, the blackberry. Then they also removed trees that are identified as not needing a permit to remove. So along the southern portion of the site, there were 3 large eucalyptus trees. These trees are actually located on the HOA property, and the applicants worked with the HOA to remove these trees. The picture on the right-hand side shows acacia trees located in the eastern portion of the site, and you can see in the picture this is the roof of one of the buildings in the Parkview Terrace condominiums. And then the aerial shows the surrounding residences, and then you can see the trees located on the south and then also on the east. Following the last Planning Commission meeting, there were 3 outreach meetings that were coordinated. The first one was on November 19th with staff, the applicants, and then Carol Shawn of 219 Baltimore Avenue. Also on November 19th, there is another meeting with staff and the applicants, and then the residences who live in the single-family homes on Redwood Avenue. And then on November 20th, there was a meeting between staff, the applicants, and then the residents of the Parkview Terrace Association. And at these meetings, the neighbors discussed their concerns with the applicants, and the applicants did go to some of the homes to look at the concerns from their vantage points. The applicants have made several modifications to the site plan and the landscape plan based on some of the comments and concerns that they heard. The applicants have removed the trampoline from the southeastern portion of the site. They added 2 new olive trees to the southern portion of the site. They removed the fire pit and seating area from the southwestern portion of the site. They removed the bench from the western property boundary. They added additional privacy screening along the western property. And then for the equipment, both the pool equipment and then also the AC equipment, they have added wooden horizontal boards around the equipment and then also added landscaping as well. The applicants also made a modification to the roof over the master bathroom. It was switched from a gable roof to a hip roof. The picture on the right on the top, shows the modified east elevation, and the picture on the bottom is the prior version. And you can see the gable had a peak height of 26 feet, and then for the hip roof, the height is reduced to approximately 19 feet. This shows the modification to the south elevation. Again, this is the change to the roof occurred over the master bathroom. And then on the bottom is the original east-south elevation. And then again, on the top is the modified elevation. You can see the change to the roof over the bathroom. And then on the bottom is the original version of the west elevation. And no changes were made to the north elevation. This is the elevation that faces Baltimore Avenue. And at the tallest peak, it has a height just under 22 feet. And these show the modified story poles. The picture on the left is the original story pole showing the gable roof. And then on the right-hand side is the modified roof over the bathroom. Following the November 12th meeting, the applicants completed a shade study, and the complete shade study is included as attachment 9, sheet 18. And the study includes illustrations that show the shading that the proposed residence will have on adjacent structures. The shade study completed for the project includes the fall equinox, spring equinox, winter solstice, and summer solstice at 9 a.m., 12 p.m., and 4 p.m. As noted by the architect who completed the study, one of the adjacent buildings, Parkview Terrace Building 9, is mostly in shadow because of the orientation of the building and the elevation of the building as it relates to 223 Baltimore. The shade study did not take into account geologic formations including Christmas Tree Hill and Mount Tamalpais, given the distance of those formations from the project site. The proposed structure at 223 Baltimore casts a shadow on Parkview Terrace Building 9 in the later afternoon in the fall and winter and also in the spring solstice. And this slide shows the shadow that is cast. The picture on the left is the fall equinox at 4 p.m. and the picture on the right is the spring equinox at 4 p.m. And this is the house located to the north, 229 Baltimore. This is the proposed residence at 223 Baltimore. And then this represents the Building 9 of Parkview Terrace. And then you can see the shade, or the shadow is shown in the gray. And the modification of the roof from the gable to the hip did lessen the impact on the spring equinox. 2 additional times were also added for the winter solstice, 2:30 p.m. and 3:30 p.m. And this is to account for the sun dropping below Christmas Tree Hill before 4 p.m. And this slide shows the shadow. The picture on the left is the winter solstice at 4 p.m. and the picture on the right is the winter solstice at 3:30 p.m. And the project does result in a small incremental addition of shading to Building 9. And then these pictures were taken at 101 Pixley Avenue in the rear patio. The pictures were taken on November 18th at approximately 3:30 before the sun set. And you can see this is the back of the unit, which shows the sun. And then you can see on the right-hand side is the sun as it is setting. And then following the November 12th, 2019 meeting, staff conducted site visits at both 101 Pixley and 111 Pixley. And pictures that were taken are included in your packets as attachment 7. And these are the front balconies. This is the balcony of 101, and this is the balcony of 111. And the balconies are oriented southeast with views of Town Park, the hills and ridgelines above Chapman Park and Corte Madera Avenue, downtown Corte Madera, and also Christmas Tree Hill. And there is a view of Mount Tam from the southern portion of these balconies when looking in the westerly direction. And then the picture on the right shows the south elevation of Building 9, and there are no windows on this elevation, so there are no views of Mount Tam from inside the residence. These pictures were taken from 101 Pixley Avenue inside the residence in the living dining room area. The picture on the left was taken at the window, and it's directed in the southeast direction. The picture on the right was taken at the sliding glass door, standing on the threshold, and this view is also directed in the southeast direction. These pictures were all taken outside on the balcony at 101 Pixley Avenue. The picture on the left was taken, the view directed to the east, and the picture at the upper right-hand corner, the view was directed to the southeast, and the lower right-hand corner, the view was directed to the south. And then these pictures were taken in the southwest corner of the balcony, looking in the westerly direction. And as you can see, there is a view of Mount Tam. The picture on the left was taken in the corner. The picture in the middle, lower, was taken approximately 3 feet from the corner. And then the picture on the upper right was taken approximately 5 feet from the southwest corner. These pictures were taken at 101 Pixley in the rear area in the bedroom. Picture on the left was taken at a window looking out in the northwest direction. And then the picture on the upper right was taken outside on the patio, and the view is directed to the southwest. And then the picture on the lower right was taken at the rear patio with the view directed towards the northwest. These pictures were taken inside 111 Pixley Avenue. Picture on the left was taken at the window of the dining room with the view directed to the southeast. Picture on the right was taken at the sliding glass door with the view directed to the southeast as well. And these pictures were taken outside the balcony at 111 Pixley. The picture on the left is with the view directed to the east, and the picture on the right is with the view directed to the southeast. And again, these were also taken at the front balcony, standing outside. The picture on the left has a view directed to the southwest, and the picture on the right has a view directed towards the west. Did I say left? These pictures were also taken at 111 Pixley Avenue in the front balcony, and unfortunately, the day that staff was there to take pictures, it was overcast. If it had been a sunny day, there would be a view of Mount Tam that you would see right in this direction, very similar to the pictures that were shown for 101 Pixley. So again, pictures were taken at the corner, and then also 3 feet from the corner, and then 5 feet from the corner. The applicant did provide pictures to staff that they had taken. The picture on the left is standing in that southwest corner on the balcony looking in the westerly direction. And then the picture on the right was taken in the rear balcony. And there is not a view of Mount Tam from the rear balcony. There is a view of Christmas Tree Hill that will be partially blocked by the proposed residence. However, the change in roof from the gable to the hip does lessen that impact. And these pictures were taken inside the residence at 111 Pixley from the bedroom. The picture on the left was taken at the sliding glass door with the view directed to the west. And the picture on the right was taken in the bedroom window with the view directed to the northwest. And these pictures were taken outside on the rear balcony of 111 Pixley. The picture on the left was taken with the view directed to the northwest, which is towards Baltimore Avenue in the front of the house. And then the picture on the right was taken at the balcony with the view directed towards the southwest, which is the rear of the proposed project. In order to approve the project, the Planning Commission must make the required design review findings as outlined in the Planning Commission resolution. Staff does find that these findings can be made and recommends approval of the project. That concludes staff's presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Martha. Just to let everybody know what we'll do tonight, we're going to ask questions of staff from the dais here, and then we'll let the applicant make a presentation to follow up. And then we'll open it up to public comment, and then we'll take it under deliberation. So that's the process we'll take tonight. So do you guys have any questions for staff at this time? No from Phyllis? Bob?
Yes, Beverly Adiago, the owner of the property at 101, in her letter talked about having a view of Mount Tamalpais through the vegetation and trees before they were removed. Is there a picture of that, or do we just have the pictures of the vegetation before it was removed?
I know that Beverly Adiego referenced a picture that was included in the staff report. So I assume that the picture she was referencing is, these pictures up here, which are the acacia trees that were located along the eastern property boundary. This is the roof of Building 9, where Beverly's unit that she owns is located. I know that her tenant is in the audience, so he can confirm if that is what they're referencing. But the letter did say that they could see the view of Tam underneath the trees, which I would imagine would be this area. But he could confirm that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Bob. Mr. Lee?
So in the solar... In the solar studies, it's just the roof line. It doesn't include the porches or the areas where the photos were taken.
So the porches would be located kind of out in this area, but the structure is just showing the roof
And so
line.
can you go to the other two? So in the winter, it would affect the area where we visited and underneath, and so this shows it's not the entire built environment. It's just the building itself. So the other thing is can you clarify whether that's individual property or if that's owned by the commons space?
So it's my understanding that the individual condo owners own everything inside the wall, and then everything outside of the wall is owned by the HOA with the exclusive use of that tenant. So the back outdoor patios would be for the tenants whose condos were in that area, but that the space itself would be owned by the HOA, and the same is with the balconies as well.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Charles. Ms. Bandel, do you have any questions?
No.
Okay. I think I don't have any questions for you because I think it's fairly descriptive. So we'll move on and ask the applicant for their presentation tonight.
Testing. It's working. Let me just see if it, okay. Okay. Thank you for having us. We wanted to first off apologize to the commission and our new neighbors, as it was definitely never our intention to upset anybody in this process. We put a lot of thought and effort into designing a home that would fit in with the neighborhood. We chose a single-story design for its low impact on the neighbors, as well as allowing us to grow old in this home. That being said, we have heard the neighbors' concerns and have made several changes to our project. Since our meeting in November, we've had several neighbor meetings and property tours. We have come up with the following changes to address the neighbor concerns. We have changed the roof on the southern portion of the home from a gable to a hip roof. This will reduce the height of the southern end of the home by over 7 feet and removing about 12 feet of ridgeline. We have added additional privacy vegetation between our property and our neighbor to the west. We've removed a bench that was near our western property line. We removed the fire pit area from the southwest corner of our property. We removed the trampoline from the southeast corner of the property. We added 2 additional mature trees to the southern border. We identified the quietest and most efficient AC unit. We will also enclose the AC unit with a wooden surround and add additional vegetation. We identified the quietest and most efficient pool pump, and we will enclose it with a wooden surround and additional vegetation as well. 2 additional items came up, which were the height of the home and the view from Pixley and Redwood. Regarding the height, as you can see from this image, the overall height of the house is much less than the 28.8 number. The reason the house increases in height from the northern to the southern end is because of the slope of the lot. The northern end of the house is less than 18 feet tall, and the 28.8 number is only measurable from one single point on the southern end. We are using an engineered truss system for the roof. We're at a 612 pitch, which is the lowest pitch possible, to allow a vaulted ceiling in the great room. Going to a lower pitch would eliminate the vault and still not change the view. Regarding the view, when we bought the property last summer, the trees and vegetation were heavily overgrown. There was 30+ years of overgrowth due to the lack of maintenance. We've removed fallen and dead wood, overgrown blackberry bushes, poison oak, Scotch broom, and acacia trees. We have some before and after pictures of the undesirable fire-prone trees that were removed on the southern and eastern borders. Here are pictures of the southern border of our lot, which is the side closest to the Redwood Avenue condos. There were 3 enormous eucalyptus trees, about 80 feet tall. They needed to be removed for fire safety reasons. Our boundary survey found that they were on the Redwood Avenue condo property. We reached out and agreed to cover the full cost of the tree removal and received support from the HOA to remove the trees. Here's a picture of the before and after. These trees likely blocked views and decreased the amount of sunshine on the Redwood Avenue condos more than our proposed house will, as the trees were 3 times as tall as the roofline of our home and were much closer to the condos, while our house is set back 25 feet from the property line. Here are before and after pictures of the eastern border. There were several large acacia trees that were taller than the proposed home, approximately 40 feet high. These trees were removed because they were fire-prone and undesirable trees identified by the Corte Madera Fire Department. Removing all of these trees allowed a safe, defensible space and more sunlight to reach our neighbors on Pixley. Martha showed, I think, a slide like this, so I apologize for the dual effort. This next slide shows Google Earth images looking north from Redwood and looking west from Pixley before the trees were removed. The obvious downside of the tree removal is that there's much more exposure and visibility to see our proposed home. However, given the extensive landscaping for our project, including the addition of 2 trees requested by the neighbors, the visibility will decrease as the plantings on our property mature. There have been suggestions to shift the house on our lot. The lot is over 15,000 square feet, but also nearly 6,000 square feet of setbacks, which is areas we cannot build on. The crosshatched, in this drawing, the yellow outline is actually our property line. The crosshatched areas represent the setbacks. A single-story house has a larger footprint than a 2-story house, so it's more challenging to relocate it within our buildable footprint. We were lucky enough to purchase an incredible view lot, but the view is obstructed on, I don't think it has a red.
No, that's okay.
Okay. It's obstructed on the northern half of our lot by our neighbor's 3-story house at 219 Baltimore. So that whole first part where 219 is, the view is obstructed. And then we can't build on the 25 feet southern part here due to the setback. So it really allows us less than 50 feet of buildable area that can enjoy the view. We had a shadow analysis done following the meeting in November. It confirmed that the proposed new home will have little impact on our neighbors. Also, the 3 trees on the northern end of our lot that we have proposed to remove will allow more sunlight to reach the rear patios on Pixley. The architects who performed the shadow analysis are in the audience today and available to answer any technical questions that you may have. They provided a letter with the findings of the analysis. Would you like me to read it, or have you already read it?
We've read it. It's in the packet. Thank you.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. I'm almost done. Using the Town of Corte Madera guidelines for new construction on an R1 lot, our lot can accommodate a 6,000 square foot home up to 30 feet tall. We chose not to attempt either, and instead are proposing a much more realistic single-story home that will be built within all setback and height limitations. We are not asking for any variances for this project. We understand that unfortunately, not all of our neighbors will be fully satisfied, but we hope we have shown that we have worked with our neighbors, accepted feedback, and made changes to address their concerns. We did receive a letter from the owner of 101 Pixley this afternoon, and at 5:05 tonight, a letter from the current tenants who live at 101 Pixley. After reviewing both letters, they are raising the same issues that have been addressed in our previous meeting and current staff report. In the owner's letter, there were multiple references to Chapter 15 of the Town Code, which is titled Trees. Chapter 15 does not apply in this instance because no trees are at issue. We want to thank our immediate next-door neighbors at 219 and 229 Baltimore for their support of this project. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. Before you go, I'm going to ask the commissioners if they have any questions for you. Phyllis.
Not at this time.
Dr. Bundy.
Yeah, I think creating a surround for the air conditioning and the pool equipment is a good step. Does that also include some sound deadening material interior to that wooden fenced area, or can that be added if it turns?
That could be added.
Okay. And the other thought that I had, I know from Redwood, there's a concern about the imposing sort of nature of the south end of the building. And going to a hip roof, I think, helps that significantly. I think it's also still somewhat noticeable. And I wonder if you would consider creating a small hip roof on the remaining ridge that would just continue the line up from the existing hip roof. That would probably move the ridge line back maybe another 6 feet or so and be less imposing to the neighbors below, but not, I think, impact anything you wanted to do with the interior, the vaulted ceiling. Would that be a consideration?
We would certainly consider it. It may affect the ability for us to have a vaulted ceiling inside there because it's an engineered truss system. Now we're coming into the great room with that roof line. But we can certainly look into that and find out if that's a possibility.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Bob. I can say that it would impact the truss design, just knowing that. But, Mr. Lee, do you have any questions for these folks? Margaret?
I'm kind of a little confused about the issues of the trees that you removed before and after. And I guess I'd like some clarification. Were you saying that before you removed the trees, that the people on Pixley didn't have a view, and so your removal of the trees was a benefit to them to give them more of a view?
The trees had to go away really because they were fire-prone trees identified by the fire department on the eastern border.
Right.
The fire department has made it clear that they don't want us to have any vegetation behind our house to keep a defensible space back there. And removal of acacia trees, I think, is a pretty common thing these days for fire safety reasons.
And the
it's
eucalyptus
Same
as
with
well?
the eucalyptus trees.
Okay.
They're perched on a pretty steep hillside above the Redwood condo property, and they were 80-foot tall eucalyptus trees, non-desirable.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. We may ask you back, but we
Okay.
hope not. So, thank you. All right, so here we are at 7:35, and we're going to open this up for public comment at this point. And I would like to keep the line behind the microphone full, moving. So I'm sure a lot of you have something to say, so we're going to time you for 3 minutes, and let's get started. Someone kick it off, please. Who's going to start?
Hi, my name's Laura Williams, and I live at 103 Pixley Avenue. And I didn't get my letter in on time today, so I figured I'd just read it, and then hopefully I can give it to you guys. Thank you. Dear Planning Commission, I live at 103 Pixley Avenue. I have reviewed the latest report and wonder why mention of my unit was left out of all the narratives. Our back patio area of 103 at Lot 9 will most definitely be impacted, just as much, if not more, than any of the units on Pixley by the proposed structure, which is backed up against the property line as far as what is allowable. Yet, this structure will limit the view of blue sky, afternoon sunlight, and privacy both outside and inside of Unit 103. I am disappointed that I was unable to attend any of the meetings or arrange for visits inside. And it seems that because of this, Unit 103's living area was totally overlooked in the descriptions and the conclusions of the studies. I wonder how you could knowingly vote to devalue the properties at Parkview Terrace. Our association has enjoyed the character of this neighborhood for almost 60 years without any infringements as close as this. I am sure that I am not the only owner who urges that the Commission please consider a plan at 223 Baltimore which would situate the house on the lot so that it does not adversely negatively impact its closest neighbors. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Who's next? I know there's some people that want to speak, so please, don't be shy. Let's get up and make your statements, please. Let the record show that we're being handed photographs.
It's the ones that
Thank you.
Yeah.
My family and I live at 101 Pixley Avenue.
Could
We
you
are
just
tenants-
do me a favor, please, and state your name?
Okay. I'm Masayuki Fujita, and my family and I live at 101 Pixley Avenue. We are tenants of Beverly Diego. Thank you for coming to visit our home and seeing for yourself how the large home with the high-pitched roof proposed at 223 Baltimore Avenue would impact us if it is built. It is very unfortunate that because of the clouds you were not able to see the beautiful view of Mount Tam for yourself, and you could not see the sunshine in our patio. So to help you in your decision making, I would like to show you some photos. As you can see from the first photo my brother made, without the story poles, the view from our balcony of Mount Tam is beautiful. Because in our living room we have no windows on either the south or north sides, we spend many hours throughout the year on our balcony to enjoy our view of Mount Tam. As you can see from the next photo, if the proposed structure were to be built, it would totally block and eliminate our view. Next, you will see two photos showing the sunshine coming to our back bedroom and the patio. You can see the story poles in the fourth photo. In the fifth and last photo, you can see the sunshine going into our back bedroom and patio. We request that you do not approve the proposed plan and ask the Del Sols to redesign their plan so that we can continue to have a clear, full view of Mount Tam and sunshine in the back of our house. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Go ahead.
My name is Io Fujita. I live on 101 Pixie Avenue. I'll read a letter from our landlady. Dear Commissioners, thank you for visiting my condominium at 101 Pixley Avenue. I appreciate you taking time to sincerely consider how the proposed large house at 223 Baltimore Avenue would significantly and adversely affect my view of Mount Tamalpais from my condominium and totally block sunlight into my back bedroom and patio. I have obtained legal representation from Mr. Vincent D. Martini, who specializes in land use law matters. I inherited my condominium from my mother, who purchased it in 1969, and I have owned it since 2009. I am now 85 years old, and I have not traveled to Corte Madera for some years, in part because of my husband's poor health. I am totally dissatisfied with the proposed design of the house. The slight modification to the southern roof provides a minuscule benefit to me. I am deeply disappointed and disagree with the findings in the staff report prepared for the December 10 hearing, which states that staff finds that the project does not significantly and adversely affect views, sunlight, and privacy of adjacent residences. It is obvious from the information presented in staff report that the proposed large house would adversely affect me. The proposed house would totally block my view of Mount Tamalpais, and it would totally block sunlight coming into my back bedroom and patio. The staff report does not recognize how significant my view of Mount Tamalpais is to me, or how significant sunlight is to me in terms of the value of my property and quality of life in my condominium. The view and sunlight preservation part of the town code says it is recognized that every person owning real estate property in the town has the right to have a reasonable amount of the view and sunlight benefiting his or her real property, which existed at any time during the period beginning on the date that the complainant purchased the property and ending 12 months immediately following thereafter. Everyone in Corte Madera knows that a view of Mount Tamalpais and sunlight coming into property adds significant value to that property and healthful enjoyment. The town of Corte Madera recognizes the value of views of Mount Tamalpais and sunlight in the town code. Views of Mount Tamalpais produce a variety of significant and tangible benefit for residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Jeremiah Mock. I live in 101 Pixley. I'm going to continue our landlady, Mrs. Adiego's letter. The general plan states that the view preservation is very important, and views from residential properties add property value and enhance quality of life, and that development should focus on minimizing significant negative impacts to neighbors' views, and that these issues must be balanced and evaluated on a case-by-case basis. So Mrs. Adiego says, in 1969, my mother purchased our condominium because there was a clear, unobstructed view of Mount Tamalpais from the front balcony. When my mother purchased the property, there were no trees or structures along the property line. My mother paid for the value of her view of Mount Tamalpais, and for decades the view has been a part of the quality of life of our condominium. For many years, my mother and I and family members enjoyed the clear view of Mount Tam. Looking at the view of Mount Tam from my balcony is just as significant as if I could look at the view through a window. Since there are no views in that windows in that direction, my view from my balcony is even more significant and precious to me. In Corte Madera, people spend a lot of time outdoors enjoying views, including from balconies. Sometime in the more recent years, while I was living in Idaho, the owners of 223 Baltimore let acacia trees grow on their side of the fence. I didn't realize they were there. My tenant has told me that he had a view from over the last 2 years of Mount Tam through and below the trees. That was in reference to the photo that was shown. Thus, the view of Mount Tamalpais is still part of my property value, and I have a right to the view regardless of the acacia trees being there or not. I'm going to skip forward. If I were to sell the property, then I would request that the owners of 223 Baltimore remove the acacia trees, and then I would have had the property appraised, and the appraisal value would have included the view of Mount Tamalpais. Regarding the sunlight, I totally disagree with the finding in the staff report that the proposed house would not significantly and adversely affect sunlight coming into my condominium. Regarding the shadow that the proposed house would create on the back bedroom of my condominium and the patio, the staff report says the proposed project results in an small incremental and additional shading. I totally disagree with this finding. Photos in the staff report show that even during the early winter, when the sun angle is low, sunlight still comes directly into my bedroom, sliding glass door, and patio. The shadow study acknowledges that during the fall and spring, more sunlight comes in. The blockage of precious afternoon sunlight caused by the proposed house would not be small or incremental, it would be total. Unfortunately,
Thank you, Mr. Mark.
Kazu Fujita, 101 Pixel Avenue. I'm also going to continue the letter from Mrs. Adiego.
Okay.
The logic in the staff report does not recognize these issues. Things of value that are scarce are even more important. Saying that because my condominium receives limited sunlight is a structure that creates a total blockage of sunlight does not significantly or adversely affect my condominium. Is like saying that because my house has a well that produces very little water, the neighbors have a right to drill a big, deep well and pump out all the water underground, leaving my well dry. I have a right to sunlight in the back of my condominium. The Del Sols do not have a right to take the sunlight away permanently. The Del Sols stated in their September 9th letter to neighbors that our priority is to build a home that blends into the neighborhood and does not stand out. I trusted this statement. Unfortunately, the proposed house would stand out. It would completely block my view of Mount Tamalpais and block sunlight that comes into my back bedroom window and into the patio. If the Del Sols are allowed to build their home as proposed, they will take the view of Mount Tamalpais from my property and benefit entirely for themselves. This means I would lose property value and quality of life, and they will gain property value and quality of life. Their property value will increase while mine decreases, and they will enjoy all the view of Mount Tamalpais, and the view for my property will be only of the back of their house. If the Del Sols are allowed to build their home as proposed, they will take all of the afternoon sunshine for themselves. This means I will lose property value and quality of life, and they will gain property value and quality of life. They will enjoy all the sunshine, and I will have nothing but darkness and more dampness. Allowing the proposed house to be built would not represent a balance between my rights as an existing owner and the rights of new owner. I would lose entirely. That would not be fair. So I respectfully ask you that you reject the current design and layout of the proposed single-family residence and instead give direction to the owners to develop a revised plan that fully preserves my right to the view of Mount Tamalpais and fully preserves my right to sunlight in the back bedroom of my condominium and patio. Sincerely, Beverly Adriego, owner of 101 Pixley Avenue. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Peter, may I ask a question for clarification?
Of us or staff or,
Well, I just want to know if this picture was taken after the trees were cut down, that this is just something that exists since the trees were cut down.
yes.
Thank you.
yeah, yes, that's correct. That photo is what you would see if there were no story poles in the current location.
Thank you.
But there was a view of Mount Tam below the
Thank you.
trees.
All right, we have that information. Okay, who else wants to speak up? we have a lot of people here, so I'm sure that there's some commenters.
Hi, my name's Nanette Grimm, and I am an owner of 109 Pixley, and I'm actually a board member of Parkview Terrace. But I am here in my capacity as a homeowner. Bear with me, I didn't prepare anything. I kind of wanted just to come and feel out the situation here. But I did make a couple of notes from the staff report that I wanted to address from my perspective. First, one of the comments was that the building would not adversely affect the beauty of the town. Well, maybe from Baltimore Avenue, that might be the case because it's kind of hidden, but I don't know how many of you actually went to some of the lots on Parkview Terrace. When you go up the driveway of Lot 9, you can see the building towering above everything, the building, the whole thing. So it does adversely impact our living environment. In terms of view isn't always just for me about the view of Mount Tam. I would far prefer seeing trees and nature than a building. The building is very, very close to our lot. You look up and it is right there, right in our faces. So it's going to impact privacy, whether or not the windows are of the bedrooms or whatnot. We look up and we see the building. It's in our face. Also, there was some talk about it being harmonious with the existing neighborhood. Well, it might be the neighborhood right on Baltimore Avenue, but when I think of Corte Madera, particularly the west side, it's the old town. And it has that kind of feel of old town. And when you see this building towering above from Pixley or even from Tamalpais Drive, once it's solid, the story poles are different. Once it's a solid building, I don't think it really fits in with the feeling of that old town. It's a modern building, and it really does show. I guess my concern is not whether or not the DeSaules, who I've been told are lovely, and I have no reason to doubt that, want to build or not. It's just how it impacts us. We bought our properties without that building being there, with trees and views and going up our driveway where there is a common area that is totally impacted. It might not be our patios or our decks from the back, but there's a common area where we have a little garden and seating that will totally be impacted by this. So I would like to see something else done. We bought, like I said, our properties with that impression of the neighborhood. There was no guarantee that this project would be approved when the DeSaules bought theirs. So I hope you consider everything that we've all said when you're making your decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Nanette. I have a lot of faces looking up here, so who wants to get up and say something, please? I don't want to continue to encourage, but I will
But you will.
shut it down if we don't have commenters. So please, if you want to say something, stand up. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brian Marcus. I live at 125 Pixley Avenue. And I just wanted to expound on what Nanette has said as far as the structure. You look up that driveway from Pixley Avenue, and I'm at 125 Pixley Avenue, and it's imposing. And I feel it's going to change the character of where we live. Also, I'm very concerned about property value. I believe that if the buildings up the driveway in Lot 9 are going to be affected by this, we're all going to be affected at Parkview. And I wish property values weren't as high as they are, believe me, but it's the game we all play here, and we have to preserve that. So that's my comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, going once. Do we have any other commenters? I don't see anybody even rising out of their seat. So I'm going to say, going twice, we're going to call an end to public comment. So that's it. No more public comment at this point. Thank you. After that, does staff have any commentary about any of the public comments you would like to address? No?
You know, just the one thing, I think it's come up a couple of times where there's this discussion about the right to views and the right to privacy. Those are obviously determined through the discretionary design review and process. And there's a balancing, as I think some of the commenters noted, there is a balancing that is the general plan says should be done, but the findings are what ultimately determine whether or not those views or privacy should be granted or not. With respect to trees and vegetation, and I think that was accurately stated by the applicants here, there is a section of the code, again, I think I mentioned this last time, related to trees, and when trees grow into views, which is sort of the opposite in the sense of what's happened here, where trees were taken away. There is language in the code about how to go about facilitating a negotiated sort of settlement or process for mediation and whatnot, but that's related to vegetation growing into views, not structures growing into views. So I wanted to clarify that. And I don't know if there were any other statements that I felt jumped out and needed to be clarified at this time, but if there are things that you would like to ask of staff, we're here for you.
Well, I might ask about if staff has any comment on Beverly Adiago's letter and the representations she makes. And then Nanette commented that, you know, when people buy property that there's no building there. Well, you can't rely on that. That's not a value, is it? Or do you want to make any?
Right. I mean, we see this all the time. I mean, if there's always ability for properties and change to happen with redevelopment of existing residential structures, commercial that happens frequently, and I think there is there's no guarantee that development cannot proceed or isn't going to change on adjacent properties throughout town. So the expectation should be clear that there are some guidelines and rules under which that development should happen, and there's a process for evaluating such change to adjacent properties. But other than that, there's no guaranteed expectation that things remain the same. I also, there were some comments in the letter regarding views and values of views and the property value and whatnot as well. You know, the findings that the commission is evaluating this under don't speak specifically to property values. They do speak to things more like quality of life and general welfare. But I would, I would sort of refrain from sort of speaking directly to that as the bar by which this project should be evaluated by the commission. There are also some claims about things that would have been in an appraisal. I think we've seen some evidence also that was included in the attachment to the contrary, that necessarily wouldn't have been included in an appraisal of Mount Tam views. And I think the estimates of what those views were are contradicted by sort of the appraisal information we got from the appraisal at 111 Pixley Avenue. So, which was included, was that in the staff report or was that in the additional information?
It was an attachment, the additional comments received.
But I think clearly views from those properties have value, not only from the quality of life perspective, but from an appraised value as well. Staff, as we documented in the staff report, and Martha can speak more to this, but It's clear that the findings talk about views in the plural, which should be evaluated and in terms of the process of what is significant and adversely impacted. So I think to attribute all of the value of the view to one particular view from a portion of the balcony is, in staff's opinion, would be overstating sort of the direct value attributed to that view in an appraisal, for example.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any questions after listening to that for staff? No.
I do have
Yes.
one quick clarification. So we've talked about it before. I think it's in the general plan about preservation of ridgeline views is something that we would like to prioritize. When it's discussed, usually the interpretation is that it's something that affects it in front of it, right? That's what we've mostly seen in our deliberations. But when I grew up in Pleasanton, they actually made a moratorium where they weren't allowed to build on the ridge lines themselves because there was one house in particular that built a very substantial house up there, and then they never let anyone else do it again because it was so poorly received, right? So I guess what I'm asking is there an interpretation of, is it building on ridge lines or is it blocking ridge lines? Because we definitely saw photos, and it wasn't just about Mount Tam, but it's also adversely affecting other parts of the ridge line. So I just want to see if there's any other information or if it's just ridge lines in general and left to discretionary understanding of that.
So I think you're referencing one particular finding. If maybe we can put the finding slide up just for reference. Is that correct, Commissioner Lee? All right.
I'm looking for you to help me.
Yep. So this is reference to finding number 2, or is it sort of how in the past, or sort of the subjective interpretation of sort of what views are important?
Well, so this is great. So it says avoid development within 50 vertical feet of a ridge line. How do we define a ridge line?
Well, there is a definition in our code, but it may not be. It says ridgeline means a connected series of locations at the top of a ridge, hill, or mountain, which from different vantage points have the sky as a backdrop. So, which...
Can we look at the topography map again?
Sure. I mean, there could... Yeah. Which map?
There was that one.
This one.
Okay. So in my understanding of topography, looking at the topography on that site, where it comes down on that side of the lot, could that be considered a ridge line decreasing down into the space? I'm asking staff. Like topographically, or I could even ask, when it's narrow like that and then it goes down sequentially, it's a ridge line. So, and the reason I bring it up, and I'll talk about it in a little bit, but I just wanted to explore this, is that, I also want to think about what a ridge line is and what the impact on the surrounding adjacent areas would be, so.
Okay. Well, you've heard the definitions of it, and from the other parts of the town, you don't see this as a backdrop against a sky. You see it with the other parts of the town behind it, if you were down low on Redwood and so forth. Yeah, it's a rise in the ground, but by strict definition, I don't think the lot is a ridge line. That's my feeling in what you're asking.
Right. It's discretionary still, right?
Right. So that's my feeling in response to that. So, and if that's what you were talking about as a ridgeline for that property, so. Anything else you want to ask staff at the moment?
No, that's all I wanted
okay.
to talk about with staff.
Peter,
Yeah.
could we see the slide that shows the placement of the residence on the property itself? There was one that actually showed the outline of the property and then,
Applicant's presentation, the shaded areas of the
Okay.
lot, yeah.
yeah,
I mean, this is showing the property lines and then the placement of the structure in relation to those property lines.
Okay.
Alternatively, I can pull up the applicant's presentation.
and where's 219 in relationship to that, to the south?
It's to the west, so 219
left.
is to, yeah,
That's what I'm saying, to the.
219 is
so-
over here.
I- What I've been thinking of is, and I don't know how realistic it is or not, and that's why I was hoping to see the picture. Possibly, since 219 looks like it's quite close to the property line, and I am thinking about flipping the house over so the house is close, just flipping the whole thing over, so the basic house is by 219. Yeah, see? Because Pixley and all of that is to the north, to the top of the picture, right?
Yep, yeah, Pixley is, if you're looking at the picture, it's to the right, and then,
Okay. I was thinking of flipping the house over. So the main line of the house is closer to 219 rather than there towards what is the ridge. I'm going to use ridge line for lack of a better word. That might help as far as the blocking of the view, having that mass further away from the edge of the property. Now, the possibilities, I don't know, because we don't have a real good picture showing the topography of the land and, you know, whether, how flat it is up there, you know, all the things that go into choosing the placement of a building.
Well, I would just say that the site plan that we have in there does show the topography underneath, and when you look at the sections of the building, you see how it slopes off, you know, but that aside, you know, that would be then saying that they can only build on a certain portion of their lot, if we were to do that, so.
Well, they're choosing to, if the front of the lot is towards, I don't see where the driveway is, it's.
To the left.
To the left, okay. If the front of their lot is to the left, they're choosing to build as far to the left of their lot as possible. And I am saying to move it further to the right.
so shifting it closer to the west, to the house at 219.
Yes, I mean, we don't have east, west, north, south marked there, and I'm going ups and downs and lefts and rights. I mean,
Yeah.
Okay,
you know, it may not be possible, or it may be possible. I'm saying I don't see the topography. I'm just looking at a flat drawing and
what would happen?
find something that might help.
For the sake of conversation, I will enter that dialogue with you about it, is that side of the lot is somewhat lower, and particularly toward the right-hand lower corner of it, that is significantly lower. So the building would be even apparently higher from grade at that point if it were flipped like that, right?
But it would be further from the lot line, which
Right.
is where they see it.
Right. For the,
As I say, I'm just
Okay.
thinking that off the top of my head. I
right.
don't have any of, you know, the.
I'm going to ask Martha to go to the photos through the story poles toward Tam for the sake of discussion.
Okay.
There you go. Okay. So we don't have the benefit of pointers anymore, right?
Well, this kind of works.
But in that.
She's a pointer.
She's a pointer, right? So in that photograph where your cursor just was there to the left photograph, right? So we know that the ridge is at 28. Then the eave down there is at 18, right there. And, you know, as a height off of ground level, so that's 18 feet, you know, reducing the height of the house doesn't do much for this. There was a photograph in the staff report that showed the adjacent house, 219, and the hedge, and it's in probably the original staff report, if it's not this one. But in any case, what happens is that if you drop the roof line by half that distance from most places, you're still going to have a blockage, you know. So what I'm getting at is, so if you move the whole house to the other side of the lot, you might have gain the perspective of this, but that ridge line is still going to block even on the other side of the property. Just, that's my fair guess.
Yeah, but I just think it wouldn't be as imposing as the neighbors say it is. I mean, if it is possible, if it means redesigning the whole house,
Right.
I'm not asking that.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and what I would say then is that because the grade is lower over there, they might exceed the 28 feet on that side of the property if they were to do that, which would mean they'd have to redesign the house if they were to do that. But even so, they could drop it by 8 feet, and it would probably still block the view of Mount Tam, even on the other side of the property. I think that would be not an unreasonable assumption. You can see in the lower right-hand photograph there that lower line that just skirts the top of Mount Tam right there, right? And that's below the 18-foot mark, and that's significantly lower, and that's still blocking Mount Tam from there.
I was thinking more of light than
Right.
Mount Tam. You know,
I-
there'd be more light.
Right, I get that. And that said, when we're talking about this, I'm going to ask staff this question about the shade study, and they make some admissions in the letter about some shade that occurs, right? But the folks who live at Pixley are calling it total light blockage. Well, there's no such thing as total light blockage. So what is your assessment of the shading study? Is it on target? Is it on point? Is it on target? And can you say that it's, you accept it as valid?
Correct, and staff was able to make the finding that the loss of light was not significant and adverse. And because in the current orientation of the building, there is, it is in shadows a lot of time, but there is still, sunlight in that area, and even with the proposed structure, that wouldn't change. And I know the architects who prepared the analysis may be able to expound more on the study as well.
And I think also there was, again, the same way that views are plural and there's many views, there's also the sunlight that does is sort of obtained at the front balcony throughout a significant portion of the day. So I think that's part of the analysis as well. Is
Right.
There's sunlight in other outdoor areas that can be utilized.
And sunlight does reach the rear balconies at different times in between those.
Correct. The different times of year where the sun is higher, it may, and so on. I would, if there are more specific questions about that, I think the architects would be who did the shade setting would be good to have back up and get into the technical methodology or whatever else that they actually did for that.
All right, does anybody want to hear from the shade study people, or do you feel confident in the information that we have about the shade studies? I'm confident in it.
Understood it.
Okay.
I feel comfortable, but if they're here and they feel they have something to add, that would be
Well,
fine,
we'd-
but
and we'd-
otherwise,
We'd open
it's
up the
fine.
public hearing again if we were going to do that, but,
Oh.
if I'm fine with what they say, and I
Yeah.
believe what they say is verifiable, so, Bob? Okay, great. I don't see Margaret's hand.
Who hired the company that did the shade study?
I believe the
The
applicant.
applicant.
Yeah, right, okay. Have they done other shade studies for projects in the town, or it's just, no?
I haven't,
Okay.
no, I haven't, I'm not aware of that. Yeah.
It's a methodology that is
Right.
pretty standard for the industry, so they have data that they cannot alter when they create a shade study.
Right.
So I'm going to start with you, Bob, about your commentary about it. I'm not asking you to land on a decision yet, but I would like to hear your thoughts on the positioning of the house, the concessions that the applicant has made, and what you think about the validity of or the extent of the views that are being claimed to be lost here, et cetera.
Yeah, I did have an opportunity to go to 101 and 111 and understand that they, really have a view of Mount Tam from the edge of that balcony. I always tell people that the toughest part of this job is dealing with the issues of views, sunlight, and privacy, and they all sort of come together here in this particular project. It's further complicated by the fact that this was really an underdeveloped lot for the last 70 years, ever since that small house was built on the corner, and there was nothing up there for anybody to see in comparison to the other houses that are in the immediate vicinity. So we've got the difficulty of an underdeveloped lot. Also, a lot of vegetation removal that occurred for all the appropriate reasons, including the big eucalyptus that's the big ticket as far as getting those removed. So I come down to concern that the view of Mount Tam is going to be lost, I think, no matter what's done. I think you pointed out that even if the house got moved over, unless it was just a completely different house or a two-story house up on the northern end of the lot, there's not going to be a view of Mount Tam. And if there had been almost any other house that was on that lot over the last 60, 70 years, there probably wouldn't be a view of Mount Tam from the Pixley properties. So I talked to Dr. Mock, about his thoughts on trying to move the structure back further to the north, flip the garage around, going up and walking on the property, sort of seeing the slope, seeing how the home at 219 and 229 are situated. I think what the DeSaules have done is, with the limitations of the setback, is, put a house up that, is a single-story house. It is, I think, imposing, particularly from the Redwood properties as you looked up, and I think the changing to a hip roof really made a difference in that. And maybe I would have to ask in more detail, but it would seem like there would only have to be 2 trusses that would have to be re-engineered to have an additional hip on the south gable, and that would be at the same slope as the others, which would make it less imposing. But I don't understand how that would affect the vaulted ceiling the way it's designed, as I understand it. So that that would be one thing I would like to see. I think you've done a lot to try to accommodate the neighbors. I think there was going to be a house there at some point You know, I think it's a very nice house, and it's just hard to imagine that you're not going to impact people to a certain extent. But the balance of, you know, wanting to be able to develop the property, have a house there, and try to do what you can to minimize the impact on the neighbors. I think you've done what you can given the situation with the lot, the elevations, and, you know, the impact on people.
Thank you, Bob. Ms. Metcalf, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, as I say, my concern was the light. I think one of the things that blocks is the vaulted ceiling, but the vaulted ceiling is part of the design of the house. It would not be the same house without that vaulted ceiling, and I accept that. The reason I asked about this photograph is because reading the letter from the owner of the property, there were trees there, and people, by looking through the trees, were able to see Mount Tam. It wasn't a clear view. I assume that those who had their view partially blocked never complained or tried to have those trees cut down or removed, and then they were. So I don't think there is much that would justify not building the house now. And I think that they said they were going to put some trees along there so would block the view of the house, and there would just be trees again. They say as long as there is enough light, and then at different times of the year you lose light earlier. That's a given, no matter where you're located. And as I say, if there was a possibility of flipping the house over, but from what Peter says, it wouldn't quite work. So I don't know. I mean, it doesn't ask for a variance. It meets the findings. And as I say, I would rely on Peter with his contractor's background about whether or not it could be flipped over, because that might help just as far as the fact that it's not so close to that property line and wouldn't be so imposing. It still would be blocking the view, but it wouldn't be blocking as much light.
Right.
So that would be about the only thing I could suggest. And going along with what Bob said about changing that, the roof line.
Right.
Possible.
So I will comment on that when I get to my turn on flipping it, because I think there's other things I would say about it, but
Okay,
I'll ask
I'm
it.
just trying to find a way that
Right.
could make it a lot easier for people to accept.
This is the hardest thing we do. So, Mr. Lee.
Okay. So the reason I brought up the ridge line is I walk my children to Neil Cummins every day from the other side, from the town center side. And my experience limited here, almost every proposal I've ever had to evaluate story poles, usually it's within a block of the space that you can notice these, even the large commercial spaces aren't visible from a half a mile away. But I see the story poles for that space over the top of Neil Cummins. And that's why I know it's on a ridge line, is because you can see clearly from that distance that the entire hill ridge line is defined by the crest that you're trying to put the massing. And so, in my opinion, and there are other opinions, I just feel like the existing house is not visible, even though your story poles are from that vantage point, and it's because it's nestled in that corner. And it does function as it is. So even though it's more difficult, or it ultimately doesn't lead to your dream home, or maybe it could with the right architect, in its current condition, I think it's built on a ridgeline, and I think it's too imposing on the surrounding community. I appreciate that you went back to the community. I really was hoping that you would find a solution that satisfied everyone's needs, so it was really easy to have you all, go ahead and move forward with your dream home. and you still might. I get a sense that there's maybe a majority already. But I do have to express that I do think it could be flipped to the other side, as the original massing was. It wouldn't maybe satisfy the Mount Tam issue, but to me, the Mount Tam is not a primary view. It's a secondary view from there, and the primary view is the entire kind of village, right? The whole kind of canyon from the front, and it's beautiful and spectacular, and this thing's a little caveat to what is a much grander view. I do think that in the aggregate, it affects multiple tenants, and so that's even more difficult than most properties in Corte Madera, because they're single homes usually. There's one owner, but you're dealing with a lot of owners, and so therefore the impacts are even greater. So for me personally, I cannot make the findings. I think it's about the ridge line. I understand that you have setbacks, but I think if you think of that as a topographic ridge line that affects the overall community, that it also then puts more land use pressures on building in that part of the lot, and pushing it back over to where it was would be more suitable. So that's the stance I would like to take. And I don't do it punitively or anything. I really wish that I didn't have to do that and either cause you an effect to try to rethink your home or anything like that, right? That's not the intent. But I do see the realities of the impacts, and I do hear the realities from multiple different sides, and that's just how I feel, and need to make the discretionary decision on my part. So.
Okay, Charles, I'll take you up on your, when I get to my turn on that. So Margaret, I'd like to hear your thoughts about this.
I think that you've built you've planned a beautiful home which takes advantage of your lot and the view you have at the expense of many people whose view is now lost. And I'm of the opinion that any view of Mount Tam is a primary view because it affects not only the view, but the value of the property and the way people function in their home. If you have a view of Mount Tam, you orient your sights to Mount Tam. That's what a great deal of Marin is, Mount Tam. And so I think that it's difficult to say that we would, or in my feeling, by that opinion, I'm making it the lot harder to build on. However, I think in this case, you have to look at the expense it is to the many rather than just to the one family. I don't think I could make the findings.
Okay. Thank you, Margaret. I think from my perspective, I think of your rights as a homeowner and a lot owner, and you have the right to build something there within reason. I think that you've made accommodations and you are well below what could be built there, and that you're only 28% of the FAR and 26% of the lot coverage. So you're 2,000 square feet below what you're allowed to do on that lot, and you're 1,800 square feet below the FAR. This is a lot that is twice the size of the 7,500 square foot minimum, minimum lot size for these standards, and you're below the heights. Someone could design a house entirely differently on that lot that might maximize that. We don't like to approve maximums because they push the limits. You guys have not pushed the limits. I think that you enjoy a premium lot at that side of the town or up there, and that you've designed a house that you're entitled to design given the sunlight exposure. I think that you're entitled to site the house the way you want to, and you're well below the maximums So I think you want to have a pool and a deck in the sun that comes in from the west, and to think that you should move it to the other side, the west side of the lot, where the building would be higher over the natural grade, and you'd have to reduce it, and then put the pool and the patio on the sunny side, a shady side of the house, I think is an imposition that can't be made. I think you're entitled to the sunlight that you get, just as, and that's your primary sunlight there, frankly. So I think that you have that right. I think that the claim that the sunlight is blocked entirely in the other units of the Pixley condos is a stretch. It is reduced, but not significantly. That's the key word here, is significantly, and the sunlight in the shade study or in the shade study does not show that it's significantly reduced. They still enjoy direct sun. It's many times of the day, and the light is not blocked. Yes, it is a TAM view that is lost, but it's not a primary. I appreciate that. I have the same problem with neighbors, but it's just something that occurs. You do have, from the Pixley condos, great views of the town, great views of backside of Horse Hill. I think it's an extraordinary view that you do have. To step around to the side, yes, that's a view you have to walk over and see. But we do have to make these tough decisions, and I think that weighing the rights of the property owner against the claims of the Pixley neighbors, I think the property owners get these views and their sunlight prerogative, and I think they've made some efforts to accommodate certain portions of their design to the neighbors. So I, for one, would make the findings for this. So, Bob.
Yeah, I think I want to take exception to Charles and Margaret's view of this. While they do have two of the units do have a view of Mount Tam, especially since the trees have been cut and before the story poles went up. But clearly, the primary view from the balconies is looking out over the Chapman, Christmas Tree Hill, and the town itself and the town park. And so I think those are the primary views from that. And the Mount Tam, while there's a view of that, it's really sort of just it's a plus, or it's an add-on. You sit at the corner of the porch and corner of the balcony, and you're able to see that. And when I looked from the balconies, looking out at what I think is their primary view, I see the ridge lines for Christmas Tree Hill and the ridge lines of Chapman, and that's what I think of as ridge lines. I think if you want to determine this slope, which does have a contour of a ridge, but this is going to impact half the houses on Christmas Tree Hill and Chapman, because that's the contour of Corte Madera up in the hills. There are, various ridges, whereas I think what Peter talked about earlier was the ability to see the ridge line and then see the sky above it. So I can make the findings. I would like to stipulate that the hip roof be continued up into the south gable.
Right, and we sort of drew that on a plan. It would not, what Bob was proposing wouldn't impact the great room trusses, but we can talk about that later. So, Phyllis.
I have to agree with Bob. I don't like having to make these decisions. I'd rather work with commercial. It's a lot easier. As I say, the Mount Tam view is to the side. If you're standing there, it was blocked for a number of years by the trees. I would hope that you'd put some appropriate trees back in, because it'd be more interesting to look at trees than your house. And the neighbors would have privacy. Just because an application doesn't have variances or makes the findings, I don't think we should just automatically accept it. But in this case, there isn't, I think anything that can be done has been done if you will follow this last thing of Bob's about the hip roof and is not going to affect your vaulted ceiling. Even if you did away with the vaulted ceiling, I don't think it's going to make that much difference either. It's what, about 5 or 6 feet?
6 feet.
Yeah,
It should be
it's,
the end of the
yeah,
gable.
it's not,
Yeah.
I mean, I just, as I say, I'm reluctant to do it, but I feel that we have to approve it, that there is nothing else that can be done. As I say, I thought possibly flipping it if possible, and Peter has explained why that would not be advantageous.
Right, okay.
And the only other option is to go back and start from scratch, and I don't think anybody wants that.
All right, so you would say those words that you can make the findings for this?
Very reluctantly, yes.
Okay.
And now you see why I don't like the findings we have.
Okay. Charles, do you have any response or any second thoughts about what has been said over here?
I understand her reluctance. It's
Yeah.
very difficult because we want a win-win for everyone in the community. And ultimately, in this one, I think it's very difficult and would be quite costly and maybe still not come up with a solution. But personally, I can not make the findings, and so therefore I will not.
Do you accept, I agree with Bob about the ridge line thing. Do you agree with that or
So
not?
ultimately, as the dissenting vote, I don't think I should drive that discussion.
I'm asking for your thought about it. So, you know, he's saying,
Of
he's.
course, I do think that the hipped roof jutting out, 28 feet above a ridge line creates a 50-foot overhang, and it is imposing. Even the applicant discussed why it has that presence, even though within the guidelines, it isn't that. And so therefore, anything you can continue to do to reduce that and make concessions to the neighbors and the community to not, have that overwhelming kind of experience up there, I would appreciate. And ultimately, even if half the living room's lofted, I've been in conditions like that, and it's still nice that some concessions needed, and by right, they don't have a right to a lofted, 12-foot
No.
living room. So if you think that that's necessary or that would seek their approval, ultimately, if they don't want it approved that way and there's something within that condition that they would really, like, I have to have a big living room because whatever reason, and I'd rather reinvestigate it than affect it, then ultimately they can help that narrative. But
Okay.
like I said, that's my opinion.
All right. Margaret, any other thoughts?
Well, I think that if you look at the words of the findings, you have that word significant and adverse. And I don't think what I've heard here, anybody is really taking it seriously. I think significant and adverse, we've heard how that will affect people's property value, people's view, people's enjoyment of their property, and I take that very seriously. I think that we've heard a number of people who have told us it's of significance to them and it would be adverse to them. And I don't think those words should be taken lightly.
Well, I don't think that anybody over here takes those words lightly. So please be clear that we take it very seriously. And the extent to which the entirety of their views and light is affected is not significant in the totality of their position on that piece of land right there. That's what we're saying over here, even though it's not comfortable in some ways because somebody's going to lose out something. But when you look at the totality of the thing, I think it's our position, or my position anyway, that it's not significant in the totality of it, although from one point it is significant, right? We've had those before. For one point on a property, you look out and it is significant from that point. But as the totality of their living experience and where they are, it is not. And the light is not significant given the shading study. I take it at face value. I believe in it and I know it works. So this is a 3-degree or 1-degree view that they have lost here, and I don't think that that's significant in the totality of what they have. So, that's my statement.
Do you want to debate it, or do
No.
you want to go? Okay.
If you want to.
I could say something to that, but,
I think you should continue to have a
All right.
dialogue if you feel compelled to.
well, I'm not compelled, but I think that what you're saying is that when someone only has a small view as compared to the grand view that they will have, that's not significant.
No, I'm not saying that, because the owners of Pixley still have a big view,
But nothing of Mount Tam.
which is true, but it's a slice.
And if you ask somebody coming into the neighborhood, what is the most significant thing about Marin County, most probably they'll say, well, you go over the Golden Gate Bridge, that's the first thing. And then the second thing is Mount Tam.
So I'd like to just also contribute. So I lived in Santa Cruz for a very long time, and when I looked at homes and we talked about what views are for certain desirable things, it was always the ocean. And literally, like a postage stamp glimpse of the ocean had an ocean view to that real estate, whether it was a joke or not. But then when the property owner bought it, they could say, I have an ocean view. Okay, well, that's because everybody moves to Santa Cruz to see the ocean. We don't have the ocean here, but we definitely have Mount Tam, and maybe they're mountaineers, you know. But like the significance of the ocean in that application, I think what she's saying is the mountain can have that same, you know, if it was Mount Fuji, we would all understand it from a Japanese standpoint, right? Because it oftentimes looks like that. So I think that would, even if I saw a little postage stamp of Mount Fuji on my envelope, I'd still get it, right? Like, so I guess that, but, you know, I also then made the argument that when I was there was an even grander view that ultimately they still get to enjoy. But I just, you know.
Okay.
So I just want.
I take those viewpoints seriously. At this point, though, I'm going to turn to my right and ask, do we have a motion to make here?
Yeah. In the matter of design review application PL-2019-0084 for the demolition of an existing residence and construction of a new 3114 square foot single-story residence with a 665 square foot attached garage at 223 Baltimore Avenue. I will recommend this with the stipulation that the hip roof on the south end of the house be extended up to the existing gable roof to lessen the impact on neighbors below and provide more light and a view of the sky for the other neighbors. This is resolution number 19-023.
And for clarification, when we're looking at that photograph up there on the left, would mean that the hip roof there above the master bedroom, when then that line would continue up to the ridge.
Yes.
Right.
It would probably take 6 foot or so off the ridge, just, you know, roughly looking at it, and impact, it looks like 2 trusses that would have to be redesigned to accommodate
Right.
that.
It wouldn't land over the great room at all. Right. Okay. Do we have a second? Phyllis?
Why don't you second it?
Okay, I'll
since I'm
second
not
it.
that happy.
Commissioner Bundy,
Aye.
Commissioner Lee,
No.
Commissioner Bendel,
No.
Vice Chair Metcalf,
Aye.
Chairman Chase.
Aye. Thank you. Would you, you're going to read the,
So following action by the Planning Commission at a public hearing or meeting, any decision of the Planning Commission may be appealed to the Town Council within 10 calendar days. Appeal forms are available at the Planning Department, Corte Madera Town Hall. A $300 filing fee is required.
thank you very much. We're going to take a 10-minute break while the room empties. Okay, staff, take it away for Years in Review.
Okay, this is our years in review, 2017, 18, and 19. I don't know if you all recall, back in 2016 was the last time we did this. And I want to give applause to Tracy here for putting the majority of this slideshow together and compiling a lot of the information. And chime in at any time.
We all know who does the heavy lifting.
That's right, we do.
I wanted to put greatest hits, but I said no.
So here we go. This is so the number of projects approved by this planning commission, 2017, 2019, 22, 13, and 18. You approved a total of 4 different ordinances and policies in the last 3 years. And see, was everybody sitting here in Margaret? When did you join, Margaret?
Last year.
Last year. Okay.
Oh, thank you.
2017.
3 town projects and some appeals as well. Town projects were the marquee that allows us to do all kinds of wonderful noticing now, much easier and much more efficient. Shade structures next to Cafe Verde and the soon-to-be constructed dog park. We adopted several ordinances and policies. Take it away, Tracy.
We've got maximum lot coverage in R1 zone districts was increased from a sliding scale up to 40% today. We have a hotel density bonus ordinance that's in process, making its way. Phil's cannabis ordinance.
What is mine?
It is Phil's and Martha's ADU ordinance.
Phil's? So you're the one, Phil, about the cannabis.
He's the one.
So you probably all. 516 Chapman will introduce us to the value of eucalyptus trees and neighborhood concerns.
With trees, I'll tell you.
Yeah, turned out well. I mean, we had 516 Chapman, and then right across the street we had 502, and then we had another. We had a major 3 large construction projects in Chapman, all the same area, and everybody got along decently well. 141 Crescent remodel and 1,200 square foot addition. That one was appealed to the council, and the council denied the appeal. Did you work with Doug on this one?
Somewhat. This one is a nice one. They raised the house above base flood elevation to construct that second story there.
Mm-hmm.
I think they made some modifications to the design at the request of the commission and came back for approval subsequently after that.
That's the one near you?
Yep. That one was
It
built.
was appealed,
Right.
Yeah, the woman who appealed it was worried about drones going in the air and looking into her living room window or something.
across the street, I think. Right?
Or crossing down the street. It was kind of interesting.
Good example, I think, of a tasteful second-story addition and a FEMA lift, which we'll probably see a lot more of in the future.
Yeah, the neighborhood, all the neighbors, with the exception of the woman across the street, are, really think it's a great project and great addition. They have no issues with it.
And
Well, you could
it's
just say
handsome looking.
It's sinking faster than the Millennium Tower.
Yeah.
Seemed to have built it really quickly. To me, it just popped up there fast.
They were fortunate. They got it up and enclosed because the rains were delayed that year. So they really were able to not get slowed down so much by the rain.
21 Endeavor Cove, I believe Michael Harlock, I think, was the architect for that one.
Yes.
If you go in, plug for G Family Construction, but if you go on G Family Construction's website, they show the interior is quite impressive. I have no idea what the original interior was, but the new interior is really nice. Oh, and also interesting, 2-car garage to single-car garage.
I think that was one that the single-car garage had already been converted, hadn't it? You know, so it was.
mean the
just-
double
the
garage?
double had been,
Oh, yeah.
half of it had been
Turned
taken
into
over
living
for-
space.
Yeah.
I think you're right, yeah.
But that second story is handsome looking.
Did you work on these at all, Doug? The Groves?
122 essentially was a demo rebuild. They kept this very small portion of the house, and if I recall, it was controversial until a new owner stepped in and brought it home. And then I believe it already sold. And do you know which, Phil's? Is it on the right is 122, I think, and on the left is 124, I believe.
That's
And
right. Yep.
124, Madam, you recall that one at all? I think I have some details here.
And they left one wall, is that the one?
No, 122.
124, yeah, some large additions to an existing two-level residence. I think, any comments on that one?
No, and I mean, just generally, I think it's always good to look back and see what's the outcome of some of these projects that you've seen in plan, and then going out and just seeing how they've actually been executed. And there's a lot of lessons. I mean, if Phil and if you any lessons to be learned and whatnot. I mean, so a lot of times we're living through the construction process, which can be messy and difficult and challenging for neighbors. But the end result, oftentimes, once you get there, can actually look quite nice. And I think the 124 Grove is an example of a nice remodel, essentially, that went from a very small house, and it's still quite small on a small lot, but it fits nicely with, it's a nice style, and it fits nice with that street, and which is a pretty eclectic street, by the way, in terms of a variety of different types of architecture and styles.
See, I recall the 122, I had issues with that because they were within the setback.
That's right.
And
Did you get them to
they were
move
going to do
over?
a tear down, and there was no foundation to start off with.
So interestingly enough, and this is what's that? You say that again? Oh no, sorry. So it was, and the original owner said they were going to keep one of the walls. What happened was it became essentially a full tear down, and at some point they revised their plans, and as part of that, moved the entire structure over about 8 inches to make it within the compliance setbacks. So we encouraged them as part of that when they got a new developer, and actually somebody who knew that they were doing, that became feasible. It actually is now meeting the setbacks. There was also some vegetation in the back that the neighbors were concerned about privacy issues, and looking up into the second level rear deck. And actually just recently, it just goes a long way when you have a contractor that's willing to, midstream, they planted the right vegetation that they wanted to see. One of the trees was dying during the construction, so they figured it out. And I think just recently was finalized after discussions with the neighbors about what the proper types of vegetation they wanted to put back by the rear fence to provide screening and whatnot. So,
well, this one being so problematic out of the gate, I would venture to ask, what would you say to us would be the lesson learned in conditioning that or evaluating that particular property that we might take forward?
Well, I think the one piece of it, and we've encountered this before, I'm not sure there's much we can necessarily do about it, but oftentimes the construction process becomes challenging when you have a quote-unquote owner-builder, and this is what this started out as, and these folks often quickly sort of understand that they're sort of in over their heads. In terms of they didn't really foresee all of the issues that would be at play during the construction process, the way that somebody who's hiring a professional contractor may see. And so that's from a construction standpoint, that's sometimes some things that we sort of see at the front counter, and we sort of know what's about to happen, and it's sort of watching a sort of a storm come that's on the radar. There's not much they're legally allowed to apply for that, and we just try to encourage them to think the project through. From the planning standpoint, I think, I don't know if it's a lesson learned, but we are thinking about situations in which it sort of raises the question of when a structure becomes a new structure for the purposes of meeting all of the requirements of the code in terms of setbacks and whatnot, so that this went through design review anyways, but there may be situations where, anyway, I will say it's sort of when is a non-conforming structure have to come up to meet the current code? And leaving a one wall here, allowing them to keep that wall in the setback while the rest of the house was sort of redeveloped. It's something that we have thought about and are considering how we might change sort of the definition of that, because technically it is still under the building code a remodel project, but planning can take a different definition of that for the purposes of meeting.
I remember the first version of the hotel, the budget in the demo of the one building.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we couldn't even interpret it because of what to see what the percentage of it was and everything. So
Right.
it definitely would help to
Anyways,
understand that.
I'm delaying this.
Okay, no, I'm just thinking that the point is that when we see a train wreck coming, I can see it, I know, but,
You're
we
very
can't-
good at that, Peter.
We can't legislate that up here, and
Right.
it falls on you. And I wish if there's any advice, please impart it to us.
I would think that when it's recognized that you have to build a foundation, for the new house, that, that would be something that would trigger
That should be
things.
noticed.
Yeah.
Well, I've had a question for a while now. When there's a significant change or a change halfway through the building, at what point does it become so significant people should be noticed? When the changes in the building or the lot or the vegetation or whatever it is that was initially approved becomes so different, at what point is not only the planning commission should be looking at it, but the public the neighbors need to be noticed? That's, due process. When does due process set in on that level?
Well, that is another discussion that we started at the last one of the recent council meetings about when would sort of design review kick in.
I was at that council.
Right. So that's a similar discussion about there could be rules, and other jurisdictions have rules about something to the effect of like where 50% of the exterior walls and roof are sort of taken off. At that point, it becomes something subject to design review or whatnot.
Or a second design review is what I'm.
Yeah.
Well, an example of that was restoration.
Notice to the neighbors.
The Restoration Hardware Gallery came back to you after they modified
Because they
one of the
changed it.
elevations, and so that's an example,
Okay.
a big one where
I think we can bring some of these discussions back. I'm getting sort of the sort of like we're going on a tangent sort of look.
But on major construction
It's your last meeting,
projects,
Judith. Come on.
on major construction projects that are put out to bid, if you have 10% in change orders, you have to bring it back to be approved again. If you could do that financially, for financial reasons, you should be able to do something for design reasons too.
Yeah.
There are ways
So
to
moving up
do that.
moving up above the floodplain, 82 Granada. Good.
62.
62. Thank you. 62 Granada, right in front of my face. Can't remember anything significant about that.
This one we talked about the story poles and like how it defined that little hip at the edge. I remember very good.
Oh yeah, good memory.
Yeah, this was the neighbor who had their primary view from the ground level.
Right.
Because he was disabled.
Yes,
you know.
he was
No,
in a
70.
scooter.
Close, but not, this is a different one.
Oh, that's a different.
That one,
This one was.
that one unfortunately I
Quiet.
don't think is moving forward.
Oh, really?
Haven't gotten a building permit, have we? No.
This is another, I think this is
It's
G
not-
Family
it's-
project again, by the
They're
way.
not doing it?
They haven't submitted for building permit. So 22 Seminole, another two-story addition, this also was appealed, and the appeal denied.
And just one quick comment on that one.
Doug Bush.
I talked to the property owner, Ms. Boznansky, in person just the other day, and she stated that a handful, not all, obviously, of neighbors, including some who were not supportive of this project, did relay to her that it came out nicely, and it may fit.
Yeah, it fits in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
It really looks
That
good.
looks good.
Yeah, good project.
One of our smaller homes, elevator going up to 3 different levels, soon to be finalized. And if you remember the Great Wall there at 52 Summit, so incredible, quite a place.
I looked at that property in 2006.
Yeah. The Enclave before and after, quite a change.
I took that photo off of their website.
Yeah, good one. This was Adams, right? Are they, are they full?
No, go back to the before, please.
Oh, sorry.
That's the
Right, that's the
entrance of one of
driveway
the-
off of Casa Buena, and there were two sort of dilapidated structures on a, actually, one was rentable, and was being rented, but the other one was dilapidated. In any case, it ended up being,
So that's a great shot that they put out there. That's the marketing brochure. So the follow-up doesn't look like that from anywhere.
well, yeah, the drone looks, yeah, exactly. But, I think, if any of you want to, well, I don't know if any are vacant. I know Peter was out on the site and got to walk through a couple units while they were under construction or finalizing construction. But it's a good example of sort of infill multifamily housing. They used high quality. The contractor said that if they were going to, they wouldn't do this again. They were. It was challenging. Just it got very expensive. It took longer than they had hoped. Things like that. But ultimately, they are selling at very high prices. There are 3 very significantly subsidized affordable units out of the 16 on the property. So that's, I think, a great.
And wasn't there one that was for
Well, there-
disability, for disabled?
Yeah,
There was one
there's
unit
a couple.
to serve disabled people.
Right.
Yeah, there are a couple other properties along Casa Buena that, will come up sometime,
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Right.
For something similar.
And it's, anyways, that's a.
I do know someone that's moved into it, and they left a rental that was in bad shape in their gardens. And
Okay.
are very happy with that. And
Yeah, they're nice, very nice finishes and units,
They
and
look- Yeah, they did some
and
quality
if you're back far
materials.
enough, you're blocked. The noise from the highway isn't so challenging.
Moving to the commercial sector. 200 Nellen is
That's
soon to be-
Collins.
Soon to be opened.
Colin Russell did a very nice
Colin
job
Russell.
with that.
Yeah, did a nice job. The elevator, the great elevator shaft.
I'm glad that's not red stucco. That's all I'm saying.
Good.
Yeah.
It turned out much nicer.
Yeah.
No, he does good work.
Always surprised at how quietly that came up compared to how close it is to Tam Ridge. Not a word was spoken.
It's true, it seemed to come just overnight.
I would. There is this interesting interior. I mean, from the perspective, and I was curious if Peter, if you had any thoughts driving by at night with a lot of the interior lighting. But it's actually, to my eye, it's noticeable, but it's not glaring. There's a lot of, you see the different sort of interior lights because the roof slopes down, but in any case, I'd be curious to hear your perspective at some point. When
Every time I go by.
Yeah.
I saw it, I walked by it today, and the backside, it's actually, the glass is really nice too, the transparency through the building. And then, I definitely think that that's a nice new piece in that area, and I hope it inspires other adjacent properties to also see the value in that.
Well, the people who own that lot, who built the building to use as their home office, or whatever you want to call it, own all the other properties around, so.
Although from this image, I think we may be seeing a new sign application from Joanne's Fabric behind, which you can see is now entirely almost halfway blocked by the building.
Man, P.F. Chang's to Flores
Mm.
with its patio.
The volume of the noise I did check, and it's
The vines were growing.
Yeah, what happened to the horse? I always.
Ran away.
I don't know. But we do, and following up on the sort of the vegetation and vines, I know is something that we will be continuing to focus on.
Yeah.
No, but I'm serious. The Chinese restaurant had the big horse that.
I don't know.
It was demolished, unfortunately. Yeah.
The horse was?
Yeah, with
Oh.
under a building permit, separately from other
Not
demo
removed,
work.
but demolished.
Yep.
That's
That's what the contractor told us.
Wrecking ball.
That's
Spare
a
us with the
shame. That
details,
was a
no
nice
details.
horse.
Really?
The south entry before and the south entry after.
That looked really
I
good.
think turned out really nice.
Yeah, they've done a good.
Yeah, I mean, such a difference in just so.
I played a good
Extra
game of
walls.
Falls Leader
Well,
with
those
my son
walls
there,
were
too.
not in good shape. They
Yeah.
were getting dangerous.
And a couple schools, Marin
right.
Country Day,
Mm-hmm.
their new science building. Originally, they were going to put 2 science buildings.
Yeah.
Scaled down to just 1. Turned out very nice. And Marin Montessori across the street. Beautiful single-family home turned into a beautiful classroom.
Yeah.
Can I
That's a
just make a
shame.
comment about that and about traffic studies?
Uh-huh.
They're BS. Because
Traffic studies or BS?
I have to get out of my Prince Royal Drive every morning
Uh-huh.
at just the time all the parents who promise to be carpooling and sending their kids on
Sure.
buses.
Uh-huh.
And I have waited anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes with cars backed up Prince Royal trying to get out onto Paradise Drive because of the traffic, which was never supposed to happen. So much for traffic studies done in the summertime, which is always interesting. to me.
The residence there was originally designed by Sim van der Rij.
Yes, which made it a real shame to destroy it.
And just
Yeah.
We won't
I
go
won't get
into the
into it, but
story of what happened, why.
there weren't increases in students as part of those applications. So the traffic analysis was more about traffic safety nearby the school entries and exits. So.
To the point of changing projects, at last city council, a woman stood up and said the house next to the Simons is still ongoing. And
Yes.
that would be one that
Well-
was a train wreck, right?
Yeah, and we'll be
Oh,
talking.
you're talking about on the other side of the Simons, because the house that was converted.
Tracy, you want to talk about this?
I mean, it looks like it was nearing completion.
But it was,
thought.
but
I know
wasn't it red tagged?
we're not talking about
Peter,
it.
wasn't that red tagged at one
Yeah.
point?
Many properties have
She
been.
can't
but
undo the
we're
tape on her mouth.
That concludes our year in review. Years in review. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you again, Tracy.
Thank you, Tracy.
I'm
Good
sorry
job,
that we've
Tracy.
dumped so much on you, but that's what happens.
It's evidence tonight. You have a hard job.
But I think, I do think the other thing is, compared to earlier years, I think the last 18 months, or I would say, 12 to 18 months, there's been really a few only a couple of appeals, and even the last year, I don't think there was one in 2019.
Yeah, but there were a whole bunch of
Although
them
we-
at one point, remember?
There were several, and so I think that's a testament of, the commission's ability to sort of.
I remember Carl asking me, what are you people doing? We seem to get one a month. It went through a period where everybody was appealing everything.
The new town center sign is quite nice also.
Yes.
We had to-
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's just a small smattering of the projects that over the
Yeah,
last
yeah,
few
many.
years, there's several others. as
Many
well.
others.
RH is still in the works.
RH is under construction, Amy is still under construction.
Wasn't Amy
those big
supposed to have a roof
Those are the
that
two big ones.
was live, they were growing? But doesn't that take a flat roof? They can have a roof like this and grow? Oh, okay. How, because the woman who spoke said this is how they were gonna get the herbs and stuff for the food. How are they gonna be climbing up that?
Okay, well, that's really informative. We'll have to have a,
Yeah, we'd be happy to schedule some, if you guys want to see it, give you a little tour and maybe some other insights on some of the
Well,
projects.
you know,
if
up
you're
until
interested.
about 10 years ago, Dan used to take the commission members once a year in a van or something and drive around to see all the ones that
Let's
had
do
been
it.
done over the past year. This is easier for everybody.
Oh, well,
I mean, we could, certain ones
I
might
like a
be
van.
worth it, but to go to all of them,
okay, so,
I'll
we're gonna
move
move
the
on to.
approval of the minutes.
No, we're not there yet.
Yes, we are. Oh,
No,
I was hoping. I'm trying.
so I went to the Tuesday, December 3rd meeting of the town council, and that was the one at which the Simon neighbor made a big point about her ongoing update of the issues that appeared to be, from her definition, ongoing changes and impacts of that project to them.
Was it Simon that was complaining?
It was it the?
Hildy.
Yeah, right, yeah. So there was a couple of people popping up about the building code adoption, but nothing of significance. But the ADU discussion, that's like touching the third rail. Adam, do you want to relay the bullet points of that only because it was Mr. Andrews had some significant commentary that he wanted to make a point that
Yeah.
I didn't understand, but he might.
I think one of the main takeaways, and I may have Martha help me, but it was, I think there was some significant concern about the potential for the new state regulations to create some public safety and risks or exacerbate some problems, and led to a discussion of being not comfortable really adopting regulations that might lead to that ultimate result. And so, I think the discussion ended up being with there are 3 council members. But I think we explained that whether or not we passed the ADU regulations, the state laws would go into
Yeah.
effect
It's
on January
right.
1st in any case. And so I think ultimately it was better to adopt the regulations. And it was, I shouldn't say adopt, introduce the regulations and then have it move forward, the process move forward with the understanding. I think there was some good commentary about the overall context in which the state's sort of, taking away some of the local control on housing issues, and that's the context in which that discussion we were having that discussion. So there was also there was a comment, and maybe Martha, you want to talk about that, the change to the regulation? Yeah.
Yeah, the council did recommend one change to the ordinance, and that was to add back in an allowance for up to a 1,200 square foot ADU with approval of a discretionary design review permit. And that was something the commission had had conversations about, creating that kind of two-tier system where you could exceed the minimum size established in the ordinance through design review. So Mr. Simon spoke and raised concerns that that provision had been removed from the ordinance, and essentially requested that the council add it back in because of the rare nature of his property, that he had a property that could really support a larger 1,200 square foot ADU, given the size of the properties and the not having a lot, neighbors next to him. So the council did add that back in to allow for a 1,200 square foot ADU with design review, which would be to the Planning Commission.
And and just to be clear, this is a different Simon than we were talking about before. This is out at Simon Ranch, which is near Madera del Presidio, sort of in a valley there.
And so, the concern was that traffic study and impact study needed to be done for ADUs, but you guys pointed out that that would be a year or longer effort to create a neighborhood study that would be like the Christmas Tree Hill conditioning that we have in place. Phyllis?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Christmas Tree Hill, because that's why I want to mention. We do have something in place for Christmas Tree Hill with the limitation of how many can be done in that area. And that woman who came to the meeting who talked about she wanted in her area, and we said there hadn't been the studies, et cetera, et cetera. There is some kind of an ordinance having to do with the width of a road. I think it was 12 feet you have to have for a fire engine or stuff. There, you have to have a certain. I was thinking that maybe we could do something that if a road was less than a certain width, that we could have restrictions on the street for ADUs because of the parking.
Well, that would be a request we need to make
for an agenda item.
Another agenda item.
I know, but I'm just saying that that might be a possibility to look at, since you said these things have to be objective and not subjective, that if we had that written into an ordinance, that a road must be at least.
It did come up, and I think, I explained that, enough, we would want to study that carefully to understand if that was specifically what led to a safety impact and what that would mean not only for ADUs but potentially other types of development.
Oh, yeah, because as I say, there's something about it supposed to be so wide and stuff, the roads. And I know Peter Brown did a lot of work with you about blocking off parking spaces and stuff because of the fact that the roads weren't wide enough, that maybe it should be something in writing.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. And with that said, we've got minutes to approve.
So moved.
Second.
All right. The minutes of November 12th are, shall we give a voice vote? Ready?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank-
And we did cancel the 24th, so our next
Right, we are
meeting is in January.
January 14th, and tentatively scheduled would be the town hall preliminary review study session for the town hall addition project.
And so there's a big public meeting on that Thursday night.
Yes.
Exactly. So we're going to have the neighborhood meeting in this room on Thursday night. And really the intention of that meeting is to focus attention on the specific concerns and comments of the immediately surrounding neighbors. So we're trying to actually I know there's been some concern that it should be more broadly broadcast, but I think our intention was.
Next door is taking care of that.
It's been, it's all over next door,
I understand.
believe me, everybody knows
But so
about
for the
it.
people who may be watching the one person, the real intention of that meeting was to try to focus special attention on the immediate neighborhood that surrounds town hall. It may have different and more specific concerns than somebody community-wide. As we've done with other major projects in town, we found that the preliminary hearing study session has been a great venue very early in the process, I think, to invite the public in, have the commissioners hear about it, and get some early guidance. And in this case, it's early guidance for the town's architect and staff to hear how to move forward with what design direction to take.
Yeah, but Todd said that design that was shown at the meeting in front of the council was kind of like a filler, that was not the
That's correct.
design. But the big,
That's why we're coming in January to show.
yeah, but the big fuss now is the $10 million. That's what people are making a big fuss
Okay.
about.
I'm going to adjourn this meeting.
Excuse me,
Good night. Yeah, we can't go.
I went to a which I agree, is that there is no notice to the neighbors. And that's becomes more and more of a problem as neighbors get involved. That's all.
Is that true that there's no notice for ministerial review?
Depends on the type of project, but the vast majority of ones that go to building permit don't. There are some things that will improve in the future. I think one in particular is going to be when we get our new permit software up and running. I think there'll be a great platform for people to at least see what building permits have been applied for and whatnot. And those searches can be done anytime. But there's also other things that I think we'll be considering in terms of when notice or at least information should be provided to neighbors of a project.
Oh, that's good. I didn't know that was on that meeting agenda. That's very.
See, and you were gonna just.
We learned something.
Thank you. All right.
I do have another question for you, Peter. Have you seen in the neighborhood emails that go around, I forget what it's called.
Next door.
Yeah,
Next door.
That people are starting to talk about the cost of the town, the rebuilding?
That's why there'll be a big turnout.
That's what I just mentioned, the $10 million is
About it,
big.
yeah.
Hey, look, in San Anselmo, they just defeated
Right.
a park
So,
to rebuild the
that's what
park. They
everybody's
wanted to
talking about.
spend $9 million, and Post Chanel took care of that real fast. They needed 2/3 vote, and they only got like 39%.
Okay. Now we're done. Now we'll adjourn. We're going to let the gentleman out.